Hey there, this is Shay Dean with L.A.M.B.S Ministry, and today we are continuing our three-part series on the life of Joseph. The last time we encountered Joseph, he was in a pit, literally. However, Joseph's story does not end in the pit, and thank goodness ours doesn't have to either. The Bible tells us that Joseph's brothers sold him to some Egyptians. We pick up in Genesis 39. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Sounds like Joseph came quite away from the pit. However, poor Joseph runs into another problem. The Bible tells us that Joseph was handsome and that Potiphar's wife liked him a lot. She kept trying to get him to go with her, and he refused. Feeling rejected, she tells her husband that Joseph had tried to be with her, and Potiphar throws him in jail. Now, if I had been Joseph, my thinking may have been something like this. Are you kidding me? First, my brothers decide to throw me into a pit, and now this. Why can't I catch a break? However, God uses Joseph in his prison to usher in his destiny. So what is a prison, and why do we find ourselves in them from time to time? Well, the definition says you can be in prison for two different reasons. One, because you have committed a crime and you are receiving a punishment, or two, you are awaiting a trial. I've never been in an actual prison because of bad choices. However, I was put in a holding cell one time because of a mix-up on car insurance. Sometimes we are in prison because of choices we have made. Sometimes we are in prison because of the choices others we are yoked to have made for us. And for most of us, we carry our prisons with us. Anxiety, fear, depression, these are things we cannot run from, even on our good days. There have been times in my life when I felt like I was definitely in a prison emotionally. I felt like this a lot when my dad was heavy in his addiction. I felt like it never changed, and it was never going to change. However, we learned something from the story of Joseph in his prison. God can work if you're in a prison, the same way he can work if you are in a pit. One truth we see in the prison is that God can still lift you up. It says in Genesis 39, "But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did." We are supposed to give God a good name. We are supposed to make him famous. Even on our worst days, we can do that. It says success in whatever he did. That sounds like grace. There is grace in prison. It also says that he was with him. Don't let that truth get lost. The God of the universe, who sees it all, knows it all, and is ultimately in control of it all, sees you in your prison, and he is with you. God is in the prison you feel locked up in. Another truth about prison is that God can use your talents and gifts while you are in a prison. Genesis 40 talks all about how Joseph was once again interpreting dreams while in the prison. Your gift is your gift. The Bible says that we are all members of one body to work for Christ. Joseph uses his gifts and interprets more dreams. That gift is what eventually leads him to the palace. The final lesson from the prison is that it doesn't last forever. The Bible says that the cupbearer remembered Joseph, and he got an opportunity to interpret the dream of the Pharaoh. That opportunity led him to his destiny, which ultimately saved God's people in a time of famine. Pain may last for the night, but joy comes in the morning. God can use you in whatever prison you may feel like you are in. I want to leave you with an experience that I carry with me. I was attending a summer conference, and a beautiful child of God got up and read a poem about losing her son to cancer. It was one of the saddest and sweetest moments of my life. I was so sad for her loss. Sometimes I look at my own son, and I think about her and others like her who have lost a child. My grandmother and grandfather lost their youngest son in a car accident when he was 21. I feel as though that loss locked my whole family into a prison of fear and anxiety that I still struggle with. In hard times, it's my go-to emotionally because it's really all I've ever seen. However, the sweet lady I mentioned before was brave and stood strong in her prison and shared her testimony with a grace I have not witnessed before or since. She let God use her, and because of that, 50 plus educators made a circle, held hands, and in a very secular environment lifted up a prayer to God for her. Our worlds do not stop turning in our prison. God is still God, and His plan for you is still good. My prayer for you today is that if you are in a prison, trust the process, whatever that process may be. Trust God in the process. I know I share often about my dad, but he's the sweetest thing my Jesus has done. Prayers prayed as a child answered in such a mighty way, and I didn't think it was ever going to come. I prayed and cried and gave up so many times I would be scared to try to stop and count how many. I'm sure Joseph felt that same way. However, God is faithful. Look around at your prison, take a deep breath, and know it won't be this way for long. Thank you for joining me for our second part of our discussion on Joseph. And now Stacy and Stephanie will join me at our roundtable discussion. Hey there, and welcome back. I am joined with Stacy and Stephanie. We're going to continue talking about Joseph. Today, I just kind of talked about Joseph in the prison and just kind of what prison can be in our lives, whether it be anxiety. I know you mentioned bondage, that type of thing. And the thing that really sticks out to me about his story in the prison is that God is still using him, even though he is in that dark place and he's, struggling through some things. God is still using the gifts and talents that He gave him. Mm-hmm. So I wanted you guys to just think for a minute about maybe a time in your life where you felt like you were in bondage, or you felt like you were in a dark place where God was able to still use the things that He had put in you mm-hmm. for His good and in service to Him. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
You want me to go?
Sure.
My husband is a police officer. You guys know that. And this past summer has been really scary as far as his line of work. I feel like he walks around with a target on his back sometimes. And he's just, y'all know, I will cry. But I love him very much. And, to think of him being in harm, I feel like my bondage has been fear. And I have to, pull myself out of it. And it's always been that way. If I let myself settle into being scared about what he does for a living, then I will walk that out. Yeah. And what I've had a chance to do is train my brain to not think about it, and two, to trust that God's going to protect him. Since he started that job, I've always prayed the same prayer over him every morning. Lord, post your angels around him and let him be a light in dark places. Yeah. And I've said it since for the past 5.5 years. Yeah. And I still say that prayer over him, but I've had an opportunity to connect with other police wives, and we are joined together on a Facebook group, mm-hmm. and I try and just speak encouragement to them when they get scared or they post something and they're fearful. I just try and be mm-hmm. Lord, mm-hmm. guard their minds and guard their hearts and help us not be afraid. Help us not walk in fear.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's good. That's good. Well, I'm going to out myself today a little bit. We think about prison, being bondage, confinement, and so that's kind of where I'm going with prison, is a bondage. And my bondage has been food, primarily a sugar addiction. And for probably the past 40 years, I have really struggled. And, when God called me to do the ministry, one of those things we did were we went to churches and did women's conferences. And so that involved, standing in front of people and preaching. And I've been in bondage to food. And this year, I really felt God say, I want your food. And I knew one day He was going to come after my food, because I had to lay down other things to do this and what He called me to do. But the food was just kind of like the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. I just thought, okay, it's food. Everybody has to have food, and God can use me, plus size woman, and I'm still good. But the way I used the food was incorrect. It was bondage. There was a voice in my head constantly condemning me, and then enticing me away. Use this food to comfort you. It was how I used it, and that
was a constant battle. Am I good enough to take this gospel, but yet I have this bondage? God, can you still use me when I'm still here in this place? Because I would do things that didn't glorify God when I was by myself. I mean, I would eat in my closet. I would eat in my car. I'm talking Little Debbie's and donuts and just think, I mean, that sugar addiction just really would call my name and take me to a place of doing things in private with the food. And then that condemnation would come when I would then want to stand up and say, God is enough. All things are possible. And yet I felt that I was rendering myself ineffective for the kingdom because of that bondage. But yes, God continued to love me and work with me and help me and show me a better way of doing things. And the world puts this image on us, and so you have to constantly fight that too. But it was the way I was using food, and the Lord came for it and said, I want it. I want you to lay it down. And to tell you that this has been me doing, it hasn't. It has been hard. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. But it's been the biggest God thing that He's ever done through me. And that's been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
To feel His power working through me. And I'm not all the way over it, but I've got a way out, and we're working that out. So I know God can still use us even in those places that we have some strongholds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like you.
I think you both really talked about two totally different examples of what prison can be.
Yeah,
but that's
I got
the
a little
thing
personal.
is that we are all there at some point in our
Yeah,
lives in a place
absolutely.
of darkness. And so we just want to encourage you today, if you are in a place of bondage, or you feel like you're heavy in chains or whatever, you can always get in touch with our ministry at lambsministry.com, and there's always people praying and always someone there.
Yes.
So don't go through it alone. And God may have you there for a minute, but He'll lift you out and take you to the palace, which is where
Yes.
Stacy's going to go next time. So we're so glad that you joined us, and we hope you'll join us next time. And always remember,
Your heart matters.
If you would like to donate to L.A.M.B.S Ministry, please visit our website, lambsministry.com. All donations are tax deductible and help expand the reach of the ministry. Thank you for your consideration, and have a blessed day.